Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, once again. It's very nice to be here today. As you probably know, today is Tu B'Av. It's a special day. It's in the Jewish calendar. It's a mini Yontif along the lines of, let's say, Lag BaOmer or something of that nature. It's not really it's not a major Yontif. It's not a Yontif in the Chumash, but it's a Yontif in Chazal. It's found in the Mishnah and Tanis. The idea of the Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, and on a simple level, it simply means that all the sadness of the 3 weeks have now come to a final conclusion. Right, the Tu B'Av was connected. Tisha B'Av was connected to the Aveira of the Meraglim, as a result of which a whole generation in the Chumash died in the Midbar, and Tu B'Av was the day at which that finally came to an end and entering a new tkufa. So in a sense, Tu B'Av is the ideal time for us, ideal time for us to look at Rosh Hashanah davening and Rosh Hashanah ideas, because it's the introduction to Rosh Hashanah. It's the beginning of a new year. The Tisha B'Av is, if you like, the end of the sadness of the previous year, and Tu B'Av is the beginning of the process of looking forward, please God, to a new year. It's also connected to Chazal, connected to people finding their shidduch. So if anybody has family members who are looking for a shidduch, looking for a zivug, Tu B'Av is a special day of zivugim. And if I'm not mistaken, the secular Israeli society have adopted Tu B'Av as the Israeli version of Valentine's Day. In England, there's a Valentine's Day, which is a day of romance and finding your partner, for your soulmate for life. I think Tu B'Av is the Israeli version, been adopted out of the Mishnah, the Israeli version of that idea. Okay. The share today is we're staying with the theme, the overall theme of Iyun Tefilot, of looking a bit closer at the ideas and the texts of our davening. But I'd like to start today, in particular, looking at our davening for Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is round the corner. Some of you might be aware of this, but if you're not, I'm reminding you that Rosh Hashanah is not far away. 6 weeks' time is Rosh Hashanah. And sadly, this year, Rosh Hashanah is likely to be different to any Rosh Hashanah you've ever had in your life. Generally speaking, Rosh Hashanah, we get the atmosphere and the inspiration and the uplift from being with a community and singing the songs and hearing the chazan and feeling the general simcha and seriousness of the tunes of Rosh Hashanah, and this year, living in the Corona era, it will be different. You need to hopefully find somewhere where you can at least a little bit participate in communal davening. But my guess is that for most people, most of the davening will be done alone. In order for that to be meaningful for you, you have to prepare it. You have to look at it in advance and understand it a little bit better. I would add, of course, that hearing the shofar is something you have to organize in advance. You have to find out in your building or in your street or in your shchuna, where is there going to be Tekiyas shofar on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. There won't be shofar on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, because the first day of Rosh Hashanah is Shabbos. But the second day, Rosh Hashanah, there'll be shofar. Who's going to be blowing it and where you can hear it? Everyone will want, even if you're davening without the shul, but you can't do shofar alone. Maybe you can, but most people can't. And you need to find that out in advance. So it's not too soon to ask around in your building or your neighbors, where is the closest place to go and hear shofar at what time on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Because, and here's an interesting thing, let's start already talking about the content of today's shir. It's an interesting feature of Rosh Hashanah that the meaning of the day and the the significance of the day of Rosh Hashanah is hardly mentioned in the Torah at all. In the Chumash itself, we are given very clearly what the meaning is of Pesach, what the meaning is of Sukkot, what the meaning is of Yom Kippur, but Rosh Hashanah is a little bit of a mysterious day in terms of the text of the Chumash. All it says in the Torah about Rosh Hashanah is that it's Yom Teruah. It's the day of hearing the shofar. And indeed, the only mitzvah min ha-Torah of the day is to hear the shofar. That's the day. In one place it says Yom Teruah. In another place it says Yom Zichron Teruah. The memories and the recalling of the shofar. So Yom Teruah and Yom Zichron Teruah are really the only words in the Chumash that we have to go with in the in the Chumash itself. But as you know, we have, in addition to Torah Shebichtav, the Chumash, we have Torah Shebal Peh. We have the oral tradition of the Mishnah and the Gemara, and there we find Rosh Hashanah in some detail. In fact, there's a whole Masechta, a whole volume of the Talmud and of the Mishnah, which is called Rosh Hashanah, which deals in some detail with what Rosh Hashanah is all about. But it's interesting that the Torah, if you like, left it for the Torah Shebal Peh to explain what it is about. Maybe we'll get a deeper understanding of that hopefully as we go along. But it's also interesting to know that there are two words. The word teruah, of course, means the shofar, one of the sounds of the shofar. And even that's interesting. I will be speaking about the shofar later on, not today, but later on. The shofar, of course, has got two sounds. It's got a tekiah and a teruah. But the Torah just says Yom Teruah. We'll come back to that. But also Zichron, the Yom Zichron Teruah, which is mentioned in the Torah, also became a central idea. So much so that if you, coming back to the Tefillah for Rosh Hashanah, it's interesting to note that in our Tefillah, we don't refer to the day as Yom Rosh Hashanah at all. We refer to it as Yom HaZikaron Hazeh, Yom HaZikaron. The day is a Yom HaZikaron, a day of remembering. And the question is, who's remembering, and what are we remembering, and what is this remembering about? But as we go and look at the text of our davening, the idea of Zikaron and the word Zikaron takes center stage. And one of the reasons is because that's one of the words used in the Chumash for Rosh Hashanah, where it says Zikaron, Zichron Teruah. It's a day of remembering through the blowing of the shofar. So the remembering and the blowing of the shofar are really two halves of the same coin, and we'll be looking at what the meaning of that is. But the first, so really, if we are familiar that Rosh Hashanah is referred to and known to be a Yom Hadin, a day of judgment, right? And where does that come from, and how do we understand it? That's something we're going to be looking at, and we're going to see how and in what way that's reflected in our davening, in our tefillah. But we have very special, unique tefillot for Rosh Hashanah. And it's going to be a challenge this year to feel the uniqueness and the beauty of Rosh Hashanah in the absence maybe of a community all singing together. The songs of Rosh Hashanah are going to be missing for many of us this year. But if you do have a street minyan nearby, it's worth participating even just for a short time, because in the street minyan you will at least get some of the flavor of Rosh Hashanah as we go along. Needless to say, in one's own private life, other aspects of Rosh Hashanah, dipping your apple in the honey, will take place in your house as usual. You don't need a community for that. So you'll be able to be involved in these other customs. But the essence of our davening is very powerful and very beautiful. And the place to start, since this is not these shiurim of ours are opportunities to actually learn together, not just for me to give a speech. I'm going to start off by learning with you a Mishnah. Right? So this Mishnah goes back about 2,000 years. And this is really the very first text that we have which spells out in detail the content of what Rosh Hashanah is about. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully, there we go. Can you see it? Can you see a text? Yes? Can you give me a thumbs up? Yes, you see a text. Okay. So the Mishnah, this is a Mishnah, so you can see here at the title of this is in fact Mishnah Rosh Hashanah. That is the very, very beginning of a whole volume, a tractate of the Mishnah called Rosh Hashanah, and speaks about Ba'arba. So it starts off with Ba'arba Parokim Ha'olam Nidon. The world is judged 4 times the year, and the key word here is Nidon. Nidon comes from the word din, comes from the word judgment, and it's because of this word in this Mishnah that the day is referred to as the Yom Hadin, the day of judgment. Again, I mentioned to you that the Chumash doesn't say anywhere that Rosh Hashanah is a Yom Hadin. It just says that Rosh Hashanah is a Yontef, and you blow the shofar. But what the message of Rosh Hashanah is, that is left to the oral tradition, to the Torah Shebaal Peh, to spell it out. And the key word here is this word that I've highlighted, Ba'arba Parokim Ha'olam Nidon. The world is judged on four times. So it starts off by saying Ba'Pesach ala Tvua. This is really simply agricultural, right? So agriculturally, we know that Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot in the Torah are given to us not only as simply days of Yontef, but days which are significant agriculturally, right? In the ancient world, the whole economy and the whole, if you like, well-being of the country depended on the agriculture. Today, it depends more on the stock market than on the agriculture. But originally, it was the agriculture. If the harvest failed, that was it. You were in for starvation and difficult times. So the times of harvesting and reaping and ingathering is Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. So these are agricultural times, which is not my subject for today's Shia. But since it's in the Mishnah, it says on Pesach ala Tvua. On Pesach, it is a time for the harvest. Atzeres ala Peirus, right? Atzeres here is the rabbinic word used to refer to the Yontef of Shavuos. Shavuos is fruit because of Bikurim, the Mishnah of Bikurim. And at the end of, and then it says here at the end, Ubachag Nidonim al Hamayim. And the Chag, when the Mishnah speaks about the Chag, it always means Sukkos. Why that is so, subject for a separate shia. But there we've got Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkos, the Shlosha Regalim mentioned in this Mishnah. And interestingly, we don't think really of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkos as times of judgment. We think of them as times of celebration. Nevertheless, there is hidden within Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkos, there is also a theme of din. And that's in fact why we have a minhag when we open the Aron HaKodesh to take the Sefer Torah out on Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkos. We say Hashem, Hashem, Kerachim v'chanun, Erech Apayim, Rav Chesed v'emes, which is a text relating to judgment, asking for God's mercy in judgment, which you would have thought is a bit out of place on Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkos, but it isn't if you understand what this Mishnah means. In other words, these are Yomim Tovim, which are connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's passing judgment about the harvest for the year, the rainfall for the year, the fruit for the year. All this are the essential features. We don't feel it so much in the world in which we live. We are disconnected from the earth, disconnected from the produce of the earth, and we feel, okay, so if it's a bad harvest in Israel, we'll import it from South Africa. And therefore we're not affected by it. So we don't think in terms of our well-being so much connected to the produce. If I'm not mistaken, the actual amount of income in the GDP of Israel that is produced by agriculture is less than 5%. So in actual fact, the well-being of the country is not related so much to agriculture. Okay, so that's just the other, if you like, the secondary material. But what does it say in the middle of this Mishnah? And here is the crucial line, which appears again in our davening. So here you can see I've highlighted it. I'm going to highlight it now. So here it says, Barosh Hashanah, on Rosh Hashanah, right? Kol bo'ei olam, all the people of the world, lefanov kivnei moro, they all pass before him. And when the Mishnah says him, is obviously it's a reference to the Almighty, reference to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Every person in the world passes before God, kibnei maron, right? So I've translated it here like a shepherd inspecting his flock, right? That is one of the interpretations that the Gemara gives. The Gemara gives 4 different interpretations. What does bnei maron mean? Bnei maron is a rather is an unusual phrase, but the generally accepted interpretation, the one which appears in the Unasane Tokef, which we'll be looking at some later point, is like a shepherd inspecting his flock. And the implication of a shepherd inspecting his flock is that he inspects them one by one. In other words, it's not that, it might also be true that the Jewish people or mankind are judged as a whole, but on Rosh Hashanah, the uniqueness of Rosh Hashanah is that we are judged kibnei maron, one by one. So this is really the very first time that we see in the Torah, and this is the original source of the idea that Rosh Hashanah, the importance of Rosh Hashanah, the power of Rosh Hashanah, is that we know that we are being judged, that we are being inspected carefully on Rosh Hashanah, and we're standing, if you like, before the Bet Din Shel Ma'ala is the phrase used in the Gemara, the court of the Almighty, right? And there is a general theme which we'll look at, which occurs in some of our davening. The theme of mi ya'amod lefanav badim, the feeling that nobody can bear, if you like, the scrutiny of the divine court. If anybody understands what it means to be scrutinized, to be under the microscope before the divine court, every thought, every action, every deed, every misdeed, everything that we or anybody that we have done, that is being inspected by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's why these are Yomim Noraim. These are days really they are days of fearful days. There is an element of fear, of yirah, right? And also yirah also means awesome days. Now, these are days where we are being looked at and we're being judged, and our tefillah is all of our tefillahs revolve around this idea that we are being judged and we wish to be exonerated and to accept a good, to get a good ruling. By the time Yom Kippur comes around, we want to get a good ruling. But the idea of judgment is at the heart of everything that is in our tefillah of Rosh Hashanah. But I'd like to also highlight something else very important in this Mishnah. Let's just look at this phrase again, because this is a key phrase. So what doesn't it say in this Mishnah? It doesn't say that on Rosh Hashanah the Jewish people are being judged. It says B'Rosh Hashanah kol ba'ei ha'olam ovrim lefono k'vnei bara. All the people in the planet, all the people in the world are passed before him in judgment. So I just want to talk about this for a second, because it's a unique feature of Rosh Hashanah. And in this way, Rosh Hashanah is actually very distinct from Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot are days which relate uniquely to Am Yisrael. Pesach is the creation of Am Yisrael. Shavuos is the Torah to Am Yisrael. Sukkot is the special Ananei HaKavod, the protection that the Jewish people get, the Hashgacha Pratis, but it's very personal between the Jewish people and God. Rosh Hashanah is also, of course, between the Jewish people and God, but actually it's about mankind. If we look at our davening, which we'll do in a few minutes, Rosh Hashanah is a universal day, a day which the Mishnah says all the people of the world are being judged, right? And therefore, it's if you like, it's a gift for us that we know that it's a day of judgment and that we can behave accordingly. But in a sense, it's not only the Jewish people. In fact, we find, as we'll see later on, in the famous piyut of Onesane Tokef, that we read, V'al ha-medinos bo ye'omer, ezo la-cherev, ezo la-rov, ezo la-shalom. What are the medinot that we are referring to in our tefillah? The medinot are the nations of the world. There's a judgment on Rosh Hashanah. What type of year is this going to be for the nations of the world? Is it going to be a year of plague or of health? Is it going to be a year of economic prosperity or of disaster, economic disaster? What type of year it's going to be? So there's a lot riding on the judgment of Rosh Hashanah, also for the individual, also for the Jewish people, but even for the Umot HaOlam, for the whole of mankind. In some way, the Mishnah says, Kol Boi Olam, over in the fon of Kibnei Moran. I just want to relate to you a small anecdote in my life. Very early, I think it was the first year that we were married, we were in London, and for some reason, I won't go into it, we decided to go for Rosh Hashanah to Gateshead. Some of you might know what Gateshead is. Gateshead is a little town up in the north of England. It has the biggest yeshiva in the UK, and it's a real a Torah community, a Haredi Torah community, housed in a very primitive sort of mining village of Gateshead. It's an interesting place to go, and I had a few friends there. My wife and I, as a young married couple, went to spend Rosh Hashanah in Gateshead. Anyhow, so as you know, on one of the things we do on Rosh Hashanah is tashlich. So tashlich is a minhag to go down to the local lake or river and say a tefillah by the river, by the lake. So in Gateshead, there is a big park with a lake in this park. Anyhow, at a certain point during the day, the whole yeshiva's finished davening, and you got hundreds and hundreds of people, men, women, and children, all streaming through the main streets of Gateshead. And you must understand, for the non-Jews in Gateshead, it's a regular Wednesday morning. The shops are open and the buses are running, and suddenly there are thousands of these Yontuf dressed men and women walking through the streets. And of course, the old residents of Gateshead know exactly what's going on, but the others look a little bit shocked by who are these people and what are they doing. Anyhow, we'll go down to the park. And of course, davening by the lake is also a little bit of a strange thing to do, which is not so easy to explain to people why we're doing it. But why am I mentioning all this? Because there were hundreds of people around this lake. So I went for a little bit of a walk around the lake. I'd never been to this particular park before. And I met a non-Jewish guy with a mustache and two dogs, walking his dogs in the park. So I said to him, good morning. He says, good morning. It was good afternoon. It was good afternoon. So he says, so he looks at me and he looks at what's going on. He said, I know it's your new year today, isn't it? So I was impressed. Here's somebody, a non-Jew, who is knowledgeable about our customs. I said, yes, you're quite right. It's our New Year's Day. And it's a very serious day for you, isn't it? So I said, yes, you're absolutely right. You must understand, for the non-Jewish world, New Year's Day for them is all about partying and getting drunk and doing crazy things. For them, the whole idea that New Year's Day is a serious day is a bit of a stretch. Anyhow, and then he said to me a sentence which stayed with me the whole of Rosh Hashanah, and I can still remember it clearly today. He said, you do know that you have to pray for us as well, don't you? That's what he said to me. You do know, don't you, he says, that you have to pray also for us, right? Meaning the Gentiles, for the non-Jewish world. somehow, somewhere along the line, he had learned, or he had read, or he'd been told, this Mishnah, right? The Rosh Hashanah is a day which not only the Jewish people are being judged, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu judges the whole of mankind, all the nations. And the new year, Haba Aleinu L'Teva, the new year, which is going to start, please God, in 6 weeks' time, and the new year, and particularly this year, we're going to daven that the new year should be a healthy year, a year free of the plague, where life can be restored to the sort of life we're accustomed to. But his line, you do know, don't you, he says to me, that you have to pray for us as well. And that was really, I think that is something that every one of us needs to understand, that when we're standing in Tefillah on Rosh Hashanah, we are, of course, davening for ourselves, we're davening for our families and for Am Yisrael, who always needs protection and needs prosperity and needs to find a good leadership and needs to find achdus and needs to find inner peace, all the things that we hope for the Jewish people. And we also are davening for Umot HaOlam, for the whole of mankind. And in this way, in this particular point, I'm mentioning it, because in this point, Rosh Hashanah is unique. It's unique. Because Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot are not connected to the nations of the world. Neither is Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is also not connected to the nations of the world. Rosh Hashanah is the day that we stand before God, not only as members of the Jewish people, but as members of mankind, members of humanity. We stand before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the origin of that is this line in this Mishnah. Rosh Hashanah kol boy olam over in the following, all the nations of the world, right? Right? As I've translated it here, right? On Rosh Hashanah, right? All the people of the world pass before him like a shepherd inspecting his flock. And the Mishnah brings a pasuk in Tehillim. I'm not actually sure exactly why this pasuk in Tehillim particularly is here in this Mishnah, but there it is. This Mishnah in Tehillim, in Hayotze Yachad Libon Amevin El Kol Ma'asehem, is a pasuk from a parak in Tehillim that we say every Shabbos and Yom Tov in Pesukei de Zimra. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he creates Yachad Libon Hamevin El Kol Ma'asehem. The pasuk which refers to this phrase Hamevin El Kol Ma'asehem, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu understands all our actions. Okay, so this is really the textual basis for the whole content of Rosh Hashanah. Now, when we actually on Friday night, actually this year it's going to be Friday night. Our first Rosh Hashanah Tefillah will be on Friday night when we daven Ma'ariv. And until we get to Shemona Esra, there's nothing special, nothing Rosh Hashanah unique about our davening. But when we start our Tefillah, we introduce the introduction to the Rosh Hashanah Tefillah. And this is, again, the key phrase of the day. Our Tefillah revolves around this phrase, which comes again and again in lots of different formats. Zochreinu l'chaim. So the word Zochreinu, I've already mentioned to you, comes from the Chumash, that it's Yom Zichron Truah, that what's happening on Rosh Hashanah is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is remembering us, right? But here what we're davening for is Zochreinu l'chaim, remembering us for life, right? And so here's an interesting thing, that the life that we're talking about here in this initial paragraph, so life, of course, means life as opposed to death. So obviously we're davening that we should, please God, have a year of, that we should live through the year. But there's much more going on here than that. This isn't just Chaim in the Torah. Incidentally, I want to tell you something interesting about the word Chaim. Right? The word Chaim, probably one of the most familiar Hebrew words for everybody. So what does Chaim? Chaim means life. But look at this Hebrew word a bit more closely, right? So to live, to be alive, is chai, right? Chet yud, to be alive. And actually life is not chayim, but chiyut. Chiyut means life, is the noun. Chaim is a very interesting word, and if you know how the Hebrew language is structured, the Hebrew language has a unique phenomenon. The grammar of every language has got the singular and the plural, right? There's table and tables, right? The plural. But the Hebrew language has got a third a grammatical form, which is the dual form. That if you like, when you speak about einayim doesn't mean lots of eyes, it means a pair of eyes. And misparayim means a pair, is a scissors, because it's a pair of cutting edges, right? And oznayim means a pair. The word ayim, that form of ayim, means a pair of two which go together, right? Einayim, oznayim, raglayim, right? It always means a dual form. And similarly, chayim means a dual life. It means a physical life, to be alive in this world, but chayim for us also means a spiritual energy, a spiritual life, meaning a life of purpose, a life of meaning. So Zachreinu l'chayim, so you'll see in a minute, how does this continue? Zachreinu l'chayim, right? So Rashi here brings, because these are days of judgment, you see this? And our lives hang in balance, so we pray to Hashem to remember us for life, right? Because of, that's why we say this on Rosh Hashanah, right? And we say Melech Chafetz B'chaim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu desires life, right? I brought you a pasuk in Yechezkel, that we know that what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us is to live life to its fullest, and this is both the physical life and the spiritual life. And then here comes another phrase which is going to recur all the time in our Rosh Hashanah davening, the Kosveinu B'Sefer HaChai. So this is a metaphor of Chazal, that God has got a book. God has got a book, right? And the book, right, has got lots of different chapters in it. And each human being has got a chapter in God's book, right? And what is he going to, and at the beginning of each year, something is written about the forthcoming year. And we want to be written in the Sefer HaChaim, in the book of life, and as I say, dual life, right? Both physical life and a meaningful spiritual life to be written. And here, and this is the most, if you like, this is the clearest statement, is Lema'ancha Elokim Chai, that we want a life which is not only lived in order to survive and to enjoy and to derive pleasure from living, but we want to live Lema'ancha. We want to live for your sake. In other words, we want HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help us to live a life which is dedicated through mitzvot and Torah and building Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael and family life. All this is Lema'ancha, a purpose connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, and this little phrase, which has only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 words, right? These 11 words are inserted into our davening right at the very beginning. And when you say them for the first time, whenever you say them, you're going to be saying them for 10 days, starting from Rosh Hashanah, in all your davening. Zochreinu l'chayim, melech chafetz b'chayim, to be remembered for life. And this is probably one of the most powerful tefillos of the entire year. These 11 words inserted into our tefillah, where we say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we understand that that life itself, right, is dependent on Rosh Hashanah. On Rosh Hashanah, we are somehow inscribed in God's book for a year of particular year. And what sort of year is it going to be? So we're davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We want to have a life of Chaim, both physical life and this word here. This is a key word here. Lema'ancha Elokim Chaim. A life which is lived Lema'ancha. So much so, incidentally, that I must say I saw in the writings I saw in the writings of the Arizal. The Arizal was one of the great Kabbalists of 500 years ago. So he writes actually that the tefillah that we say at the beginning of every Shemona Esrei, Zachreinu L'chaim, is subtly different from the tefillah we say at the end of the Shemona Esrei, where we ask for Chaim Tovim, right? V'kosveinu, right? That L'chaim, Uchsov L'chaim Tovim Kol B'nei Brisecha. We say at the end of our davening, and then we say B'Sefer Chaim, right? Tovim. We ask for Chaim Tovim, right? So the Arizal says that the phrase Chaim Tovim relates to Olam Hazeh, relates to this world. We're davening for good health and parnasa and security and protection for our enemies. But Zachreinu L'chaim in the beginning of the Shemona Esrei is actually we're davening specifically to merit a spiritually meaningful life, a life of ruchniut. The Chaim here is a spiritual life, says the Arizal. And that's the difference between Chaim and Chaim Tovim. It's actually interesting because in our Kaddish, some people ask for Chaim and some people ask for Chaim Tovim. There's different nusach in the Kaddish. So according to this understanding, the Arizal, it's actually a different tefillah, right? Yehei Shlomo Rabba ben Shemaiah v'Chaim Oleinu, or do we say v'Chaim Tovim Oleinu? Kol Yisrael. So if you ask for Chaim Tovim, you're actually, according to the Arizal, you're asking for this worldly benefits. If you daven l'chaim without the Tovim, you're asking for something else completely, which is a spiritual meaning life, a life with a nitzchiyut to it, with something transcendent, something of infinite meaning. That's the Chaim. So if we come back to our little tefillah here, so here, this is the introduction to Rosh Hashanah tefillah. And if you're davening Friday night, and this is the first tefillah, it's worth saying these 11 words a bit more slowly, whether you're davening alone or in the community, doesn't matter. These are words which contain the essence of the entire day. This is really a summary, the briefest summary of the entire day. That is the essence of our tefillah. We're davening for the Chaim, the physical and spiritual life for the new year. And we realize that in a sense, for those people who are involved in the property market, one of the biggest differences in property market is whether you buy something freehold or leasehold, right? If you buy something leasehold, you have to renew your lease every now and again. You have to renew your lease. Freehold means it's yours forever, okay? So what the Chazal are telling us is that life itself is a leasehold contract we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And every Rosh Hashanah, we are coming to the boss to renew the lease. We'd like, please, another year of Chaim, of life. That life itself is not freehold. We like to think that it's freehold. It helps us live more smoothly and more without anxieties. But in actual fact, Rosh Hashanah tells us that life itself is an annually renewable lease. And that's what we're doing. We stand before HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our tefillah on Rosh Hashanah, and in our tefillah we are asking for the lease to be renewed. I think in English there is a phrase like that, isn't there? A lease of life, to give a lease on life, to have a lease on life, right? And I think actually this is actually literally true in our tefillahs of Rosh Hashanah. We'd like, please, another year in which we can achieve great things and do mitzvahs and live lema'ancha, right? This is the key word. We're going to live a life where we're going to do something, make a difference, lema'ancha, for your sake. Okay, and now I'd like to have a look. We still have a quarter of an hour left of the Shia. I'd like to have a look at the second unique addition that we make to our davening on Rosh Hashanah, and it starts very strangely with this word uvechein. So uvechein. There are no paragraphs of our davening throughout the year that start with the word uvechein. And so, it's a little bit of a strange word to as an opening. Usually our tefillot open with the word Yehi Ratzon, or we ask for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rafa'enu, but Uvachen is a strange opening. But there are 3 paragraphs here, one after another, which start with the word Uvachen. And the Mefarshim say something very interesting about the significance of the word Uvachen. Does anybody know, anybody in the shir know, I'm asking a question, does anybody here know where in the Tanakh the word Uvachen appears at the beginning of a statement? Does anyone know where? Because this is a connection to an event in the Tanakh. So Uvachen, anybody know? Anybody want to tell me what they know? Anyhow, so for those of you who listen carefully on Purim to Megillas Esther, so you have in Megillas Esther that Mordechai comes to Esther and he says to her, Gewalt, we're going to be destroyed. You must throw yourself at the feet of Achashverosh and beg for mercy. So what does Esther say? It says, look, I can't do it. I can't do that because that's not the way it works. So Mordechai says to her, look, im hacharesh tacharishi lo eis hazos, revach v'atzola yamalei mukamacha v'at. This is it. This is a now or never moment. You, Esther, are uniquely placed to save the Jewish people. So she says, okay, I'll do it, but I'll do it my way. Achashverosh is not somebody who you throw yourself at his feet and beg for mercy because he has no mercy. There is no side of him. You can't appeal to his mercy. He doesn't have appeal. You can only appeal to his ego, or you can appeal to his anger, or you can appeal to his jealousy. You have to know how to, Achashverosh is someone, you need to know how to deal with Achashverosh. Esther understood how to deal with Achashverosh. She has to make him jealous a little bit. She has to make him angry. She can't beg for mercy to Achashverosh. But she knows that coming uninvited into the palace of the emperor could possibly be a death sentence for her, because that was the law of the empire, that no one's allowed to simply walk in without being invited, right? So what does Esther say? Does anyone remember what Esther says? Anyone like to? Okay, you're muted. Okay, so Eli has muted you. So Esther says, she says, you must take Leich Kenosis Kol Yehudim, go B'tzumu Alai Shlosha Yomim, Laila V'Yom. You have to fast for 3 days and daven for me, and maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then she says this word, Uvechen avo el hamelech asher lo kadat, v'kasher ovadati. Esther says, okay, Uvechen. Uvechen is a sad word. It's a word of trepidation. The word Uvechen has been imported from Megillas Esther into our davening to give us a little bit. Of course, the authors of the Tefillah assume that all of us know our Tanakh Ba'al Peh, and we know the significance of every single word in the Tanakh and what emotion it's meant to evoke. So they chose this word, Uvechen. Uvechen is Esther saying, look, we're at a situation where life itself is at stake, and I have no choice. Avo el hamelech asher lo kadat. I'll come to the king even though I haven't been invited, right? Ukasha ovadati, and if I'm lost, then I'm lost. Incidentally, I just want to tell you, I know it's not Purim, but I just want to tell you what Chazal say about kasha ovadati. Esther's plan, the Gemara in Megillah says, Esther had a plan A, which Baruch Hashem she didn't need to use, because she used plan B. She managed to get Achashverosh sufficiently angry to destroy Haman without it. But Esther's plan A was she was going to go to the meeting with Achashverosh and Haman, and she was going to, in inverted commas, she was going to confess to the king that she was having an affair with Haman. And then the king would have no choice but to execute both of them. And that was how she was going to get rid of Haman like that. She was going to make a bogus confession of having an affair with Haman, and that way she could kill Haman. She could get the king to kill Haman. Bakasha ovadati. I'm going to go. This was a suicide mission for her, going to the king to get rid of Haman. But she said, that's it. I'm going to do it to save the Jewish people. Baruch Hashem, it worked out better than that. And Esther didn't have to sacrifice her life. She could get rid of Haman differently. Why am I saying all this? Because the word uvechen is the opening word of the most, a moment of great trepidation. And we are also, in Rosh Hashanah, we are nichnas lamelech asher lo kadat. We are standing before HaKadosh Baruch Hu undeservedly. We don't deserve to stand before HaKadosh Baruch Hu and ask for all the things that we need to ask for, right? Choneinu avinu malkeinu choneinu va'aneinu ki ein banu masim. Asei imonu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu. The last of all the avinu malkeinus is a confession that we have no real zechuyot, and we are asking only for matnat chinam, right? Choneinu va'aneinu ki ein banu masim. We have no merits, right? We do not have sufficient merits. So really, it's an expression of humility, standing for HaKadosh Baruch Hu and saying, we're not asking for something that we deserve. We're not asking because we think that's the right thing you've got to do. We're asking for Chazdei Hashem. Right? We'll have a look, please God, at a future Shia and all the Ovinu Malkeinus and what is unique about the Ovinu Malkeinu Tefillah. But here, coming back to this word uvechein, when you say the word uvechein, you've got to spare a thought for Esther Hamalka. Right? Uvechein is a word of Esther Hamalka, that she is about to step into an enterprise which could be the end of her life. And she said, I'm going to come before the king, even though I don't deserve it. So the word uvechen marks, I've written here, marks the beginning of the special Shemona Esra of every Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur service. And here comes the interesting thing. What are we actually davening for in this paragraph? We don't actually ask for forgiveness, nor do we confess any of our misdeeds. We don't. Rosh Hashanah is not like that. We say, Tein pachtecha Hashem Elokeinu, right? That we should grant your awe, that the pachad of HaKadosh Baruch Hu should eventually come al kol ma'asecha. So kol ma'asecha is all your creatures. So again, this relates back to the Mishnah that we learned a few moments ago, that Rosh Hashanah is about mankind. We are actually davening here in this paragraph, strange though it may seem, we're davening that the whole of mankind should wake up and recognize the truth of our emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this is not about the Jewish people. This is about al kol ma'aseh barasa, all that you have created, all your creations, the yira'ucha kol ha'maaseh, and all your works should fear you. Right? In other words, everything that you created should recognize the presence of God. And all created beings should prostrate themselves before you, right? And we're davening for, in a sense, world peace. In other words, this is a paragraph which connects to our messianic vision. In other words, if you're standing before HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the Yom Hadin, and you're asking that this year should be a special year, so we go for the greatest possible request anybody could ask for. Not for our own personal well-being, not even for the well-being of our family, not even for the well-being of the Jewish people. We ask for the well-being of mankind, that mankind should come to its ultimate goal of V'yasu kulam agudo achas, that they will all join together to create a single aguda. I've translated it as union. Lasos retzoncha b'leiv shalem, to do your will with a full heart, the perfect heart. Right? Kamoshi Yodanu Hashem Elokeinu Sha'ashilton Lefanecha Oz biyodcha, gvur b'minecha, v'shimcha neira, al kol masha barasa. If you're davening alone, ladies and gentlemen, if you're davening alone, even if you don't think that you're really very good at singing, but I would suggest to you to try and replicate the nigunim that you've heard in shul for all these years. Because the nigun of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur contains such a tremendous power that it goes straight into the neshama, straight into a person's heart. And that's why this year is going to be so terribly difficult for so many people. Because even if you have a street minyan, it's unlikely that in a street minyan with no acoustics and no real chazanim, it's unlikely you'll be able to recreate that magic, which is Rosh Hashanah. So you have to sing it to yourself. If you don't know the nigun, there's still 6 weeks to go. Find yourself a recording, buy yourself a recording, go online. I'm pretty sure you can find online a recording of some chazan. Last year, actually, Rosh Hashanah, I was in the Yeshurun Shul. Some of you might know the Yeshurun Shul. On King George, is a corner of King George and Shmuel HaNagid in Jerusalem. And Chazan Asher Heinovitz was davening the tefillas, and it was absolutely sublime. It was just magnificent. And the way he used the nus, anyone who knows what a top-class chazan can do to the community on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, it's a complete and utter powerhouse. The music is a powerhouse. And that's why I'm a bit nervous this year that so many people are going to lose out from that inspiration of the music of the Yontov, more than any other Yontov. There is, of course, a special Nusach for Pesach and Shavuos and Sukkot and everything, but the music of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is so crucial to getting into the right frame of mind and having proper kavanah for the day, that if you can find somewhere where somebody is going to give you a little bit of the Nusach, even though I know this year, even the minyanim that exist are going to cut it a bit short. They're not going to do all the piyutim, and they're not going to do everything that because of standing outside in the sun and even in the shade outside is not an easy business. But I hope I've given you a little bit of an introduction to Rosh Hashanah. We've learned a Mishnah. We know that it's a Yom Hadin. We know that it's a Yom Hadin for the whole of mankind. We've learned Zochreinu L'Chaim means L'Ma'ancho. We're davening not just for life as opposed to death, but life as opposed to meaningless life. Meaningful life as opposed to meaningless life. That is life with a purpose, a spiritual purpose. Somebody has asked me if I could find a link to Rosh Hashanah melodic tefillah. Okay, I'm going to look online, and I'm going to try and find somewhere online the nigunim for Rosh Hashanah, and I'll send it to Eli. And maybe you can send it out on your email list. Is that okay, Eli?
Yes.
I think that might be a good idea, because you do need, this year, ladies and gentlemen, you can't just walk into Shul Rosh Hashanah like you step onto an elevator and expect to be carried up by the shul, because there is no shul and there is no tzibur. So you need to have your own elevator. You need to lift yourself up. And the way to do it is by listening to these nigunim. If you can find the nigun, you can play it at home in shul, play it at home during the next 6 weeks. Have it playing, get into the frame of mind, and please God, we will go into a Rosh Hashanah, and it should be a year of Zochreinu L'Chaim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us really Chaim Tovim, and should one of the Avinu Malkeinus is Mena Magefa Minachal Osech. We refer explicitly a couple of times in our davening to protecting us from a Magefa, from a plague. The plague which has shut down economies and shut down travel and shut down family life and shut down so much of our Beis HaMedrash and Beis HaKnesses. Please God, in the new year, it should be opened up again.
Is it possible to summarize the Uvechein?
To summarize the word Uvechein?
Yeah.
Okay, the word Uvechein means, as I say, means, you can see here, I'll go back to it just for one moment. I thought I had summarized it. The word uvachein literally just means and so, right? And so means and everything which has happened to me so far leads me to the following situation. And the following situation is Avo el hamelech hashelo kadas. I'm going to stand before God, even though I don't really deserve to ask for anything that I'm asking for. And if I'm lost, then I'm lost. But I'm taking my life in my hands and standing before HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Tefillah. That's really Uvachein, and that's connected to Esther HaMalka in the story where she goes to Achashverosh, even though she has not been invited, and she knows. She says everybody in the whole empire knows. Anyone who comes to the king uninvited it's a death penalty. It's a fatal mistake, right? And whatever we get from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we will accept. We will accept any ruling from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but we ask for Zachreinu L'chaim. Please God, next week we will continue, and in 3 weeks' time I'm taking a break for a week. So we're having 2 weeks and then a break for a week, but next week, please God, we will continue the show. Okay, Ali?
Lovely, thank you very much.
Lovely to see you all.
I just wanted to add this, that at Beit Knesset Anossi, we're going to try very hard to actually have a shul service. So because Rabbi Wein is quite a machmir in having a kehillah as long as it is physically possible and safe to do so. So we will try to. We won't be able to fit everyone in, I'm sure, but we will make an effort. And perhaps if our Shlichei Tzibur turn up, then we will even have some lovely singing as well.
Good, I hope you do. I certainly hope that you do. I'm sure there will be some, just won't be as much as usual. Yeah. And most people won't be able to have a place in the shul. Because there's simply, if you have social distancing, there's no way you can fit everybody into the shuls.
Sure.
And many people don't want to go into enclosed spaces anyway.